Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Kasper.
The news that not only shocked the Wisconsin sports world, the baseball world, but the world in general yesterday. Shortly after we hopped off the air, it was announced that Hall of Famer, legends, I mean, you can give him many titles and it probably still wouldn't be enough. Bob Uecker passing away at the age of 90. Also revealed that he had been battling cancer. Small cell lung cancer for the last couple of years. However, Uecker, as we know, if you've listened to these games, listened to the games last year on our radio dials, still went and called some games, apparently even same days after going through radiation treatment, still showing up to the ballpark and doing games every so often last year. But that's definitely the big topic out there, and this morning for our whole program here, we're going to be opening up here shortly. If you have any stories, any memories that you would like to pass along, you can by hitting us up either with a text. We'll open up the phone lines in just a little bit if you want to share it on the air and such. But you know, when it comes to somebody like Bob Uecker, even if you've never been able to meet him or talk to him or, you know, just get a picture of him or something like that, I feel like we all have a story, whether it's a call, you know, listening to a call in your vehicle while a game, there's a certain call that kind of maybe just stands out to you that you've remembered over the years, and obviously with us being in Eau Claire, maybe some of us have a little bit more of a connection if you go way back in the day with him, you know, playing some ball here in Eau Claire and such. And every once in a while when he listen to a call of his, he may name drop the city of Eau Claire and such and tell a story in that. And maybe our ears perked up just a little bit more listening to Mr. Baseball's calls and such. But I feel like even, again, if you never met him, never had a relationship with him, we all felt like we knew him, though. You know what I mean? It all felt like we still knew him. We viewed him as a friend. We viewed him as, you know, somebody that we've grown up with for a lot of us, probably our whole lives. For me, that is the case. He's been the Brewers guy my entire life when it comes to listening to Brewers games on the radio. That's all I have known in my nearly 39 years of existence. So it just had this feeling, and that, again, never have met him, never met him in person, never maybe even talked to him. But I think for a lot of people, you felt like you knew him, and you felt like you had a relationship with Mr. Baseball. So but what are some of your memories, or what is it? You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be a specific one. It could be, you know, I know a lot of people were chiming in on our social medias, just kind of reminiscing back to when they were younger, maybe hanging out with their dad, maybe even doing a little fishing or riding in the family vehicle, and Uecker's game was on, or maybe you're sitting out in the back porch. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in college, me and my roommates, still best friends to this day, we'd be sitting out in spring, maybe even in fall sometimes. I remember the spring ones, though, with our charcoal grills in the front, whether it was on Chippewa Street or Niagara here in Eau Claire, and having the Brewers games on and having Uecker on. We'd turn them up in our cars. Somebody would pick their car because chances are, with the state of our vehicles, the battery might have died. But so we took turns, place, you know, what vehicle was going to air the Brewers game. We'd get the grills going, and we'd even play catch in the road and have to wait for cars to go by. But that was, as a lot of people would say, the soundtrack of summer, soundtrack of spring, soundtrack of summer, when Uecker was on the radio and such. So, you know, those are memories. I remember certain calls, you know, in my car. For one that always stuck out to me One, I don't know why it always stuck out to me, but I remember coming home or going back to college, actually. Leaving home, going back to college. It must have been a Sunday or something like that. And in my red Oldsmobile Achieva, thinking it was this sweet sports car, and I'm like, dude, it's an Oldsmobile, but still, that was a time then. But having the game on, and I remember Uecker was trying to do like an interview or talk with a kid. And anybody who's tried to, if it's not your own, but you've tried to talk to a little one, and they may be a little shy or a little apprehensive, and, they're not the greatest interviews of all time. Some are pretty good, but they're not the greatest ones over there. And I remember him saying, like, you gotta lighten up a little bit. You need a beer or something like that to this youngster, stuff like that, Or I remember going to my first ever Brewers game. It was at the Metrodome, and I was in elementary school. Yeah, I was in elementary school. It was a day game, and it was Brewers Twins. And I remember we got there. Gosh, I wish I remember the year. I know I was in elementary school, so it was a long time ago. But I remember we got there early to watch a little BP, and we were above the Brewers dugout, maybe trying to catch an autograph and such. And I remember watching BP, and there was a dude on the mound dressed up, but wearing an older Brewers uniform, pinstripes, and throwing BP. And, I'm a young kid at that time, and I can't recognize a lot of the players and such, especially, older players and that. But it was Robin Yount. It was Robin Yount throwing BP, and he walked underneath us. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then there was another dude that was to our left, maybe, 20 feet or so on the field, though, but back to us. And just this, you could tell, fancy suit. Just dressed to the nines. It was a good suit. It was like a tan suit, too. And whenever he was done with that conversation for whoever he was talking with, he turned around and walked right on us. It was Uecker. And at that time, you had these cameras that you develop film and such, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's cool. It's Bob Uecker. And I took pictures of everything else, but I still wish I would have been able to snap a photo of Uecker over there and kept it. So, but that still lives in my memory bank, and there's so many more memories to that. We've got 3 hours, a little less than 3 hours now to share. But if you've got, even if you think it's a small one, even if you just think it's a call, that radio call that you heard, or maybe it's, Major League movies, whatever, commercials growing up, front row, all that. If you've got a memory, you got something, a story that you would like to share, again, you can hit us up with a text, and a little bit later on we'll open up the phone lines if you'd rather give us a call on the air there too. So all throughout the all morning we'll be talking Uecker and sharing stories and such. So, but Brandon's going to be joining us coming up in the next hour, and anybody who's listening to this program knows that Brandon, diehard baseball, and he has a fantastic piece that he wrote for the for the Chippewa Herald. You can check it out at chippewa.com. But it is an absolute fantastic piece by Brandon, and he talks about the impact Uecker had on him, but also relating to his grandma and such. I don't want to ruin the story because it is a fantastic story written by Brandon, and kind of some of his memories, and it includes his grandma on there too. So just a very good piece. Go check it out again, chippewa.com. Brandon will be joining us starting in the next hour. Is every typical Friday he'll be joining us too. So some other topics we'll try to hit on throughout this morning. We've got Dr. Crow will be joining us just past 7 o'clock for Inside the Training Room. So we'll catch up with Dr. Crow. Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst also held his season-ending press conference yesterday. A couple of notes from it. If you didn't see any of the highlights, I know there was a lot of other stuff going on, and if you were probably like me, you were probably listening to a lot of old baseball calls or Hall of Fame speeches or movie clips and stories from others. But Goody did have a presser yesterday. And a couple of notes from him. I think the big quote that kind of stood out for everything, and he acknowledged this, but he said, quote, "We need to continue to ramp up our sense of urgency. I think it's time we start competing for championships." So, how can he contribute to that sense of urgency, to ramp up their sense of urgency? How can he add to that? Probably free agency. He acknowledged that they would be active in free agency. Also acknowledged that they've got a little bit more. They got a little bit more wiggle room that they can do a little bit more in free agency. Could one of those be a receiver? He says he's open to adding a receiver through the draft or free agency. But he's also expecting the current group of wide receivers to take a necessary step on a down-to-down basis as well. He also said there is no disconnect between Jair and the team. Quote, "There's frustration from both sides that he can't get out there." Goody said his contract isn't prohibitive, whether he will be back or not, but that they will, quote, "work through that." Then last night, too, our good friend Rob Demoski reported that the Packers have let go of their defensive line coach, Jason Rebrovich. I can never pronounce his last name. I apologize. And I'm dealing with a throat issue. But nonetheless, the Packers are going to be looking for a new defensive line coach. He had previously coached the outside linebackers under Joe Barry and such. But remember, the assistant defensive line coach that's currently on the roster came over to Green Bay with Jeff Hafley, and he had coached the defensive line over at Boston College. So you kind of wonder if that's just going to be an elevation at that point. But nonetheless, quarterbacks coach and defensive line coach now open for Green Bay. Falcons also reportedly interviewed Derek Ansley for their defensive coordinator position. In case you don't remember, he is the pass game coordinator on the defensive side for the Packers. So we'll throw a little bit of that in here too. We've got hoops, Bucks are in action, Badgers are in action and such. We'll do a little cream of the crop coming up in the 8:00 hour. Do some local sports roundup with Brandon as well. So, but let's jump right into it. I know a couple of you have already sent over some memories and shared some stories and such. So keep those coming. All right, kind of like to do that for throughout the whole program here. And if it means we're talking Uecker 90 to 100% of the time, I don't think anybody would mind too much. But I mean, think about it. Think about it. This is in a state of where we have a team like the Packers that are so legendary, owned by the fans, Lombardi, Lambeau, Starr, Favre, White. I mean, the history, the championships, and the Hall of Famers in there. And you look at the Bucks, who have, at one point, Luell, Cinder, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, one of the greatest players of all time, and his run there. And then you have Giannis right now. But when you think about Wisconsin sports, probably number one is a broadcaster for a baseball team that hasn't won a World Series. It's Bob Uecker. I think if you did a poll and you asked a lot of Wisconsin sports fans, who is number one when you think of Wisconsin sports? And it's Uecker. With all the history in Green Bay and all those Hall of Famers, coaches, players, you throw in Giannis, you throw in Kareem, you want to throw in the Big O, Oscar Robertson. Heck, even if you stay with baseball, you got Hank Aaron in there too with Milwaukee. You got Robin Yount in that. But when you ask, I fully believe this. If you ask a lot of Wisconsin sports fans, when you think Wisconsin sports, if you had to pick somebody to represent Wisconsin sports, I think the leading vote getter would be Bob Uecker. What is that? I mean, if that doesn't tell you something, the impact that he had on so many Wisconsin sports lives, I don't know what does. But a broadcaster, yes, he played baseball, but we know him as a broadcaster, and that's the type of impact that he has had on sports fans in Wisconsin throughout their lives. that's pretty darn special. And I'm willing to bet, I don't know if G-Man's listening right now, but I'm willing to bet G-Man's 401k on this thing that nobody will come close to replicating that. Nobody. You can't. I don't want anybody to be honest with you either. But, all right, let's take a quick break here. We'll talk some more. Talk some more to Uecker and such. I think a day that a lot of us were hoping it wasn't going to happen. I mean, how many times over the last couple of years did we, when we were talking about the Brewers in the season, we're like, just get one for Uecker. Just get one for Uecker. And Bob Uecker, after the Mets had the come-from-behind victory against the Brewers in the postseason, which I think we all very vividly remember that game and such. And I think a lot of us, if we were listening to that game, thinking at the same time that please don't let that be his final call. And it ended up being his final call over there too. So we'll play some clips throughout the day, just kind of going down memory lane and such when it comes to Mr. Uecker, and looking for your stories, looking to share your stories and memories and such. So let's get to some of them right here. You've got Joe on our video stream here. Such sad news, but to make you feel better, go watch Ueck's Hall of Fame induction speech. That will cheer you up for sure. Yep, I watched that yesterday for sure. I think a lot of that was definitely trending. Definitely watched it. Well worth your 18 minutes over there too. Joe continues to say, most of the time it was not about listening to the game. It was about wondering what the heck Bob was going to come up with next to talk about. Coming up, with nothing to talk about, there needs to be a push to name the field after Ueck. Should have been done when it was Miller Park. Got a few texts to get to. We've got G-Man says, DK, I've got my number 9 Uecker jersey on. I actually was wondering about that, G-Man. Yesterday. By the way, I thought I saw you on the road there, G-Man. I was going to wave to you, but I didn't want to distract you. DK, have you ever read the book, A Season Up North? Yes, I do have the book. Big thanks to our good friend Mark for dropping that off. I think it was last year over there, too. So, yep, I do have a copy. Stetsville Brad, who is also one of our big resident Brewers fans out there for sure. I think that's fair to say, right, Brad, that you're one of the bigger Brewers fans that at least I know out there. But this is a cool story. Stetsville Brad says, 10 to 15 years ago, Bob used to respond to a question during a game. The Eau Claire Express were doing a Bob Uecker bobblehead, so I wrote to him, telling him about the event and asking if he had any memories of his days playing at Carson Park. He actually picked that question from all the others asked that day and fondly reminisced about his time here for like 15 minutes during the Brewers game. It was pretty neat. We did have some texts coming in from last night and yesterday as well. This was from Jeff from last night. Just wanted to shout out and say I'm really going to miss Bob Uecker and his voice during the Brewer games this year. He was one of a kind, and we as Brewers fans are lucky to have had him behind the plate and on the microphone. R.I.P. Ueck. Johnny, this is from Aaron. Johnny Carson, how do you catch a knuckleball? Uecker, it's easy. Just wait until it stops rolling and then pick it up. That's another one that definitely was, I think even when Dan Patrick was talking about it yesterday, I think he even shared that story too. So that's definitely one that's up there as well. And I'll continue to say it again. For all the history that this state has had for their sports teams, whether it's been the Badgers, Packers for sure, Bucks, throw in the Brewers and Brewers players in that. When you think of Wisconsin sports, when you think of that number one spot over there, it's pretty unique. And not a lot of fan bases, states can say the same thing about who would represent their state. If you had to put number one, like if aliens came down to Earth and said, okay, we want to meet representatives from each state that represent sports from your state. I think a lot of us would, at number one, would probably have Uecker at that one, at that one. And that's pretty darn unique. And it's pretty damn cool if you ask me. Because again, like a lot of you who are sharing your stories or just memories, it's something that you heard on the radio, or maybe something, it was one of those interviews on Carson, or maybe it was the movie Major League, or maybe it was a commercial. Y'all have a memory. And that's just the impact. And I honestly, in this day and age, you're listening to a game or you're watching a game, you've got fans that'll criticize the announcers. Packers fans don't like Buck and Aikman. We know that. A lot of them don't. It's a world of instant criticism now with social media. Heck, I get multiple messages a day saying I suck. But you never heard one negative thing about Uecker calling a game. And if you did, you're probably wrong. I'll just call it out there. I never, ever, ever, ever in my life have seen one negative thing mentioned about it. Heck, there was even yesterday I was running into interviews where Norm Macdonald was on Howard Stern telling Bob Uecker stories years ago. Howard Stern and Norm Macdonald, for crying out loud. I know we have a lot of wrestling fans, whether it's Justice, Brandon coming up here too. You got that. I could steal the iconic image of Andre the Giant, chokehold Uecker and such. Just all over the place. And if you're a little bit older than me, you probably remember Mr. Belvedere and TV stuff and all that. But just it was almost bigger than baseball. But when it came to Uecker, it was still number one was still about baseball, as he said in that Hall of Fame speech at the end of his Hall of Fame speech.
It's been a great run, but number one has always been baseball for me. No matter what else I ever did, baseball was the only way I wanted to go. I thank you very much for your attention today.
So, it's definitely going to be weird with spring training, pitchers and catchers, reporting less than 30 days, and spring training going to be right around the corner and such. It's going to be a different vibe, and you can tell. If you've been looking at some of the stories shared by players and the Brewers last year, there was a select few that knew Uecker was battling cancer, small cell lung cancer. Yelich was one of them. Some players, Brandon Woodruff was another one. And then you kind of go back to when they lost in that game against the Mets. Yelich was very emotional in that game, and you can kind of sense, now you look back at that, it's like they knew. They knew that was probably the last time. And then you kind of look back at different aspects. Yelich wearing Uecker cleats. He actually had, for players we can, Ueck bats made up. They knew. They knew that it was probably the end. And you look back at that, and that's what makes it even just more difficult. And I think, there's at times, I'm guilty of it, we're all guilty of it, and I think it's okay. But there's at times we may have took advantage of it, just we get to listen to Uecker on the radio. I think a lot of times in the last few years, we tried to make it a point, we tried to make it an effort to maybe listen to more games, and pay attention a little bit more, because you knew it wasn't going to last forever. But there's definitely times where we took advantage of it because we were spoiled with that. Dustin says, when I was 17 years old, I got to meet Bob at the airport in Milwaukee. He signed an autograph for me on my mom's shopping list, and in true Uecker fashion, stole my pen. Okay, that's an awesome story. Thanks for sharing that. E.C. Ryan, this stings. He had a way to make a blowout game interesting still, a true one of one. Ryan in Fall Creek, excuse me. But you're right, and I'm sure we can all, maybe not a specific game here but there was a lot of bad baseball he called. Right? There was a ton of bad baseball he called. And let's be real too, Uecker, if he wanted to go to a bigger market, if he wanted to go elsewhere and maybe go to a team and call a lot of playoff games, he could have left his hometown. If he'd have said, you know what, I want to go somewhere else, there would have been how many how many teams lining up to say, come over here, Bob. We'll pay you all this money to be our announcer and such. And I always love the story, too, about, never the contract because, he had the insurance from his Screen Actors Guild. But then when that expired, that's when he had to do a contract with the Brewers. I mean, then, in the next coming days, and we've had quite a few of them in the last 24 hours, these other different stories and these other tidbits to come out about him. I thought it was interesting to hear from, I think it was Brandon Woodruff yesterday talked about, there were times, whether it was Counsell or Pat Murphy, whoever was the manager, if they needed kind of a wake-up call, manager would bring in somebody to talk to the team to kind of get them back on the right path. And a lot of times, that was Uecker. It was Uecker. And I think you go back to even Braun's earlier in the season, was it when he got inducted to, was it the Walk of Fame or Wall of Fame, the ceremony in the field? He made a special note for Uecker in that. Some of his one-liners on his, this is from Brewers.com. You go to Brewers.com and it's all Uecker right now. A 200 lifetime batting average in major leagues tied me with another sports great averaging 200 or better in a 10-year period. Don Carter, one of our top bowlers. I was once named Minor League Player of the Year. Unfortunately, I had been in the majors for 2 years at the time. And then on signing with the Braves for $3,000, that bothered my dad at the time because he didn't have that kind of dough to pay out. But he eventually scraped it up. So, yeah, so many different things we could play. So many different things. Whether it's from the Major League, movies, commercials, sitting in the front row, calls, iconic calls. I mean, I was at this game, and I've talked about this game so many times, but it goes down as one of the more iconic calls from Uecker. And I remember, I was at the game, and I'm like, I got to listen to the call. I got to listen to the call from Uecker in this one, and that was the Nyjer Morgan walk-off. And so I remember, getting home, and that was at a time, too, where, that was 2011, so couldn't really access it right away on my phone. It was still out there, but I remember having to get home and trying to find it and listen to it. But so I remember, obviously I was at the game and such, didn't get to hear the call live, but then, just hearing all the, I was like, I got to get home and I got to figure, and that's honestly, one thing I'm going to miss at times. I can't remember. Some of you listening probably right now are the ones who did it, but how many times I would come in the studio to get ready for, 4 something, 5 something in the morning or such, and I'll open up the texting line. How many texts I would get from listeners, hey, can you replay the Uecker call from last night? Hey, can you play the Uecker call from Yelich's home run, from Braun's home run? Can you play the Uecker call from Jackson Chirio's home run? Every year that I've been doing this, and every year that we've had the Brewers games on, there's how many times I'll come in here and there'll be a text from a couple people, hey, replay the Uecker call. Or, hey, I missed it. Can you replay the Uecker call? That's not going to happen anymore. Tim in the Cooley region says, no better pastime than listening to Uecker on the radio in the summer. I loved working in the yard or garage and listening to him. He could make watching paint dry great. Joe says he would still be in a good mood even when the crew were getting smoked. You would never know they were getting crushed. And that's the thing, too, is that guy, he could, there was a lot of years where it was just bad baseball. But man, it would be entertaining. And just the way he'd call guys, such a storyteller. We all know about stories and such, but just such a storyteller in the sense that he could tell a story and still call the game at the same time. We're all probably can't think of an instant one there, but you're all probably thinking of a certain, at times he's telling a story and always, right in the middle, back in 1964, blowing away, full count. I was, just, what I'm talking about. It's telling a story, then getting right into the game in the middle of it without missing a single beat. and it was entertaining. It was fantastic. It was Class A stuff. It was one of a kind over there. Continue to share some stories with us if you'd like. Definitely going to be talking more when Brandon comes up with us here in the next hour and such. And then we'll play some more clips throughout the morning here too. But if you've got a memory, if you've got a story, a specific story, or something that just stands out to you from the Bob Uecker life, Bob Uecker era, share it with us. Hit us up with a text, or coming up in the next hour too, we'll open back up. The phone lines there too, so you can give us a call and share it over there if you'd rather do that too. So, couple other texts we had regarding actually a little Packers one here too. I didn't want to ignore anybody over here, but Jeff said continuing the conversation or yesterday's convo. The Rasul Douglas trade was Jair Alexander right before he started playing different and lost the enthusiasm he had on the field. Don't get me wrong, he still did his job when healthy, but the trade shocked everyone, and I think it still affects him today. Goody, yesterday at his end of the season presser, said that there was no discord between the team and Jair. Said there's frustration from both sides, insinuating that he couldn't get out on the field. So said that the contract is not a hindrance to the team, that they could still carry him and such, but that they would be working through stuff and all that. Also said that they got to have a. I thought it was a great question. I think it was from Jason Wilde. If you were listening to the presser yesterday, or went back to listen on to it and such, and kind of the expectations, and this is Titletown and such, and I thought it was a great response too from Goody, and he put it out there, right? I mean, he put it out there by saying, quote, "We need to continue to ramp up our sense of urgency. I think it's time we start competing for championships." So, where is that sense of urgency going to come from? Is it going to come from the top down? Is it going to be, how does it start off? I think it kind of starts with Goody. How do you approach this offseason? Are you going to bring in some guys? Because you bring in some free agents, it's going to excite some of the guys that you already have on your team, right? I mean, some of those guys, high-priced guys, the main guys, they want to recruit. They want to win. They want to bring in some guys that they know are pretty good. Josh Jacobs said he was going to do it. Xavier's already trying to do it with Devontae. You go out there and you bring in some free agents and such, it's going to excite guys on your team. Now, it may not excite the guys that they're going to potentially replace, but if you bring in some talented players, that's going to motivate that locker room. And then, sense of urgency from the coaching staff. They got to figure this out. They've got to, do better jobs in certain areas. And then your players too, your top players, whether it's like Jordan Love, you got to up your game too. There's got to be that sense of urgency. We got to win this thing. Window's not closing, but I think, given everything and given the cap situation that they're in, and a healthy cap situation, there is a little bit urgency to that. And I've got no problem with Goody going out there saying that. And in fact, I'm happy Goody went out there and said that yesterday. It puts a little pressure on the franchise. It puts a little, more like, okay, let's get this thing going here now. Let's really focus on this. In terms of cap flexibility, Goody also said if we kind of have to do some different things because we have the opportunity to acquire a player that can impact our team like McKinney and Jacobs did, we will do that. So, I mean, he's opening up the potential to do some stuff with the cap if they got to even open up some more money. Says he wants Quay Walker there for the long term, and Devontae Wyatt was the most consistent interior pass rusher. Said both had their best years yet. Decisions on both of their fifth-year options are coming up. And he did say about the pass rush, we didn't grow into that consistent front like we had hoped. Again, I think that's going to be something Goody's probably going to look at in the offseason to try to acquire more guys up front. I really believe that. And not to get my hopes up, I know we've kind of had our hopes up before in the past, and without any, confidence that they were going to make a move with Ted Thompson and such. I've got hopes and confidence this year that they are going to bring in some guys, maybe to help on the defensive front, on the defensive line. And I'll be honest, I will be pretty darn disappointed if they don't go out there and bring somebody in or a couple guys in. Anything stand out to you from Goody's presser if you watched it yesterday? I know, again, a lot of stuff happening yesterday, but maybe it's some quotes that you had read or saw, but was there anything that kind of stood out to you from Goody's presser yesterday? You can let us know by hitting us up with a quick message, whether it's on that texting line 715-830-1912 or hitting us up on the video stream as well. Coming up next hour, we'll kick off the second hour with Dr. Austin Crow for a little Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine's Inside the Training Room. We'll get to that. We've got Brandon coming up. Again, I highly suggest, if you can, go to Chippewa.com and check out Brandon's piece on Uecker and such. It's fantastic. Absolutely well done. Brandon may be biased and such, but one of the better storytellers that we have in our area, and it's a fantastic piece. So go do that. Go check it out. All right, go check it out, Chippewa.com. But we'll get back to some more Brewers talk with Brandon and throughout the rest of the morning. Again, if you have some memories, stories, or anything that you will remember about Uecker, share it with us. We'll open up the phone lines again coming up in the next hour here. So, Steve from Eau Claire, that final home run call of Uecker's and the fact that he still sounded so amazing is why I was so stunned to hear he had been battling lung cancer. Having lost a grandparent to lung cancer, I know how much that can impact how a lot of people sound while they're battling. But the last home run call proved Uecker was a fighter to the very end. Rest in peace, Uecker. Yeah, I don't think, you listen to a lot of Uecker's calls from last season. I don't think any of us, sure, yeah, he sounded like a 9-year-old, but given a 9-year-old, sounded pretty damn good, didn't he? Sounded pretty damn good, and I don't think anybody would have guessed that, yeah, he was battling small cell lung cancer. And the fact that he would take radiation and sometimes call a game the same day at his age, man, not many people do it for that passion these days. That's a very, very, very small list, if there's even a list. Might just be a couple of people on there. We'll share some more calls and liners and such from Uecker throughout the morning, but please continue to send those stories and memories over there too. Cream of the crop, it might be an easy one here today too. So, all right, we got a couple minutes with Morgs. Good morning, Morgs.
Attaboy, I figured you'd be in your Brewers gear today, man.
I hope a lot of people are.
Well, I know my old man and I would have Uecker on for, listen, as so many people did, and one of my favorite memories is Siggy and I, my daughter and I, used to live on the East Hill here in Eau Claire. And it was the summer. And so, like so many people, put the radio on, you're listening to the Brewers afternoon game. She maybe was 3 or 4 at the time. And so it was one of those nice summer days in Wisconsin. Maybe have a beer, you're doing some yard work. And her and I were taking a walk around the East Hill. And we were passing the neighbors, and they had their radio on in the garage. We're listening to the Brewers game with Uecker on. And they had recently gotten a little puppy. And so, obviously, I'm walking with a 3-year-old my daughter, plus me, and I'm a dog person. There was no way we weren't stopping. So this little puppy comes out to the sidewalk, and we're crouching down and getting the puppy breath and the snuggles and the smooches. And, of course, the neighbor comes over. Yeah, go ahead, pet him. We just got him. Last week. Well, what's his name? Uecker.
Nice.
And I thought, that's the perfect name, especially, and I always remember the game in the background, and it was just so Wisconsin to have a beer in the game on. So I think, like so many people, and a lot of like what you're reading from the text line, he didn't sound bad. At the end, he sounded just as good as he always had, which I think is the best note to go out on, is we have still those solid memories of him.
Right, yeah, exactly. The fact that, like they said, he was battling lung cancer.
Yeah.
And he's a broadcaster and
Right.
doing all that. It was, yeah.
And what I like about him, too, is that he just seems to be unblemished. Everybody says the same thing about him. Stand-up guy, great guy. We were in the stands last night for my daughter's basketball game, and somebody in front of us said, I remember in high school we had to write a paper, an essay about somebody we wanted to go sit down and meet in real life. And he wrote about in high school Bob Uecker, thinking, I just want to go talk to the guy because he sounds nice, like everybody's grandpa, kind of back in the day.
He had that feel like even if you never met him or talked to him, you still felt like you knew him. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a skill. Not everybody can do that. And I think he had that natural charm about him and was able to do not just the game calls, which play calling's a skill. That's a talent. Yeah. But also do the circuit and be funny and be conversational and show up on Carson multiple times. And he really was a little bit larger than life. It's like he wasn't just a broadcaster. He was Uecker, The
king of self-deprecation, too.
Yeah, which... Hey, you're in the right crowd here.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So,
were you surprised?
Yeah.
So was I. I remember thinking yesterday, even though he was 90 and things like that, he almost felt like somebody that you would never not hear.
Right, exactly. Yep. And the fact that spring training, pitchers and catchers are less than a month away and such, and I just as soon as that popped up, I was like, oh man.
I think the first game that the season kicks off with is going to be a little bit in the feels for people. So.
I agree. Thanks, Morgan.
Yeah, you too.